huge news from Venezuela. So the United States has decided to lift some sanctions on Venezuela. Yeah. And this relates to the war in Ukraine. This is what happened, okay? This is from CNN. The Biden administration will begin to ease some energy sanctions on Venezuela to encourage ongoing political discussions between President Nicolas Maduro and the opposition, two senior administration officials told CNN. You see? President Maduro. Y'all better recognize. The first step, to be announced on Tuesday, will allow Chevron, the last major U.S. oil company still operating in Venezuela, to negotiate its license with state-owned oil company PDVSA to continue operations in the country, the officials said. So this is very important because, as they say in the next line, the U.S. has for months been in talks with the Venezuelan government and opposition leader Juan Guaido about moving toward a political settlement following Maduro's contested election victory in 2019. No. Let's get this straight, okay? The only people contesting this are the United States and their allies, okay? Which, who think that, they're so arrogant in Europe and the US, they think it's up to them to choose the president of Venezuela for Venezuelans. Anyway, this is big. This is huge news because the sanctions that Biden, that the US, the UK, the EU put on Russia caused the global energy prices to go up, okay? So this is one problem, and I'm talking about gas and oil. And by the way, that means Russia gets paid more for selling less gas. But anyway, the other thing is that the United States, it used to get about 3% of its oil from Russia, and that's about 200,000 to 250,000 barrels per day. So it's not a lot. It's, 3% is not life or death. But, that in combination with the inflation, in combination with the sanctions, everything is going haywire. And so the Americans need to bring other sources of oil back on the market. So this is why we've been seeing things like this, where the Americans sent a delegation 2 months ago in March, to speak with Maduro, right? And this is hilarious because they've been telling us for years he's not the president. And then all of a sudden, when they need oil, when they need someone to make a big decision, they go to him. That's weird. I thought Guaido was the president. Why didn't you talk to him since he's the president? Anyway, the other thing the Americans have been trying to do is, the Iran nuclear deal. They want to implement, or shall I say, to rejoin. Remember, Trump quit and ripped up the nuclear deal. Everybody else stayed in it, including Iran. But the U.S. now all of a sudden wants to get back in the Iran nuclear deal after they've been dragging their feet for over a year. Right, so I've been covering the Iran nuclear deal on the ground independently. I have a great playlist on the channel if you want to learn about that and understand it. So why do they want to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal all of a sudden? Because that means Iranian oil is back on the global market, okay? Iran is one of the top producers of oil in the world. And by having sanctions lifted on Iran, which is part of the nuclear deal, that means Iran could not only benefit itself from selling oil and increasing its revenue, but global oil prices and energy prices would then calm down, okay? Because there's more supply. So this is what the Americans have been trying to do, right? They need a substitute. And one of those is Venezuela. And interestingly enough, the amount of oil that Venezuela used to give the United States is almost identical to what Russia used to give the United States. Okay, so it's a perfect substitute. Let me show you here. So in 2021, the United States, on average, imported 209,000 barrels per day of crude oil and 500,000 barrels per day of other petroleum products from Russia. Now, when it comes to Venezuela, that's about the same amount that the United States was getting from Venezuela before Trump hit them with sanctions, okay? So, again, it's about 200,000 BPD, barrels per day, okay? Let me just pull that up for you. Yeah, so here you go. This is also from Reuters, and Christ, I've lost my bloody figures. You know, I had all of this lined up and then I lost it for some reason. Anyway, it's okay. It's around the same figure, I'm telling you. So, you know, what happened basically in 2018 is that Trump and his friend Mike Pompeo, what they went and did is they put sanctions on all these countries. So that includes Syria, that includes Venezuela, that includes Iran. And what they call that is the maximum pressure campaign. Okay? So there we go. I found it. I finally found it. I found the thing I wanted to show you. Okay, hold on. So this is it. So you can see here, Chevron has been the only U.S. firm to carry out essential work to preserve its assets in Venezuela. The California-based company has stakes in 4 joint ventures with PDVSA. Chief among them, the Petropiar crude upgrader in the Orinoco oil belt. Before U.S. sanctions, the 4 projects produced some 200,000 barrels per day. Okay, so you see this is roughly the same amount that they were getting. And as I said, in 2018, what Trump did with Mike Pompeo, his Secretary of State, is they went and they started putting sanctions on all these countries, and they called it the maximum pressure campaign. They put them on Venezuela, they put them on Syria, on Iran, and it's really vicious. Remember, I want to be very clear. Sanctions are not something different to war. It is literally economic warfare, okay? If you can't eat, if you can't find medicine, if you can't import replacement parts for hospital equipment, if hospital equipment can't run in the first place because there's no fuel, a myriad of problems, okay? It really opens Pandora's box. So don't think sanctions are some, you know, peaceful alternative to war. My cousins have, you know, several of them straight up told me they prefer the bombs to the sanctions. Like, that's how bad the sanctions are, okay? And as part of these sanctions, again, that means no oil imports. That means those countries like Venezuela, like Iran, not only cannot export their oil to the US, but globally, because anybody who goes and buys oil from Iran or buys oil from Venezuela is also going to get punished by the US. Do you see how this works? So it's like a domino effect. Now, the United States, they've sanctioned so many countries that they're in this situation right now. They can't get oil from Iran. They can't get oil from Venezuela. They can't get oil from Russia. So what do? Now they have to go crawling back to Maduro and kiss his butt and beg him to give them oil. And this is very difficult because, you know, when you've tried to claim for several years that this guy is not the president, and you've made his people starve and suffer, and you've tried to assassinate him, and you've tried to coup him, I'm not sure he wants to give you that oil. Honestly, a lot of people think that he should tell the U.S. to kick rocks just for the damage and the insulting things they did. But at the end of the day, this guy's the president, and he cares about his people, and he needs to do what's best for Venezuela. And lifting sanctions is, no question, the best and the intelligent thing to do. So this is why right now they have engaged in these talks, okay? Here is a comment from, this is the vice president of Venezuela. Look at what she had to say. Venezuela hopes that these decisions by the United States of America will pave the way to the total lifting of the illegal sanctions which affect our entire people. So, you know, some optimism there. And again, keep in mind sanctions, especially you know, unilateral sanctions, they're definitely illegal. There's no question about that. There's a response also from American politicians. So do you guys want to laugh? Let's have a good laugh. So this is from this is what DeSantis is saying.
Governor, you know, the Biden administration seems Everything backwards here. We're seeing record gas prices. People are really struggling. We have a lot of people in Florida on fixed incomes down here. And yet this week we learned they canceled oil and gas leases. It appears they're doing everything backwards to get us out of this crisis. They could just follow the instruction book from the Reagan years and get this thing right, but they just refuse.
Well, Dan, the energy policy is intentional. They are intentionally reducing our ability to produce oil and gas here in the United States. They will beg OPEC for more oil. They'll beg Maduro for more oil. I guess Maduro's oil isn't global warming, but American is. I mean, it's nonsense. It's ideology, but it's very destructive, and people are getting absolutely hammered with gas prices. And the overall inflation is attributable more than anything to Biden's policy of printing trillions and trillions of dollars like they've done since he's gotten into office. He was warned. You had Larry Summers.
do you see how kind of arrogant this is? They view everything as central to them. It's not like, oh, these sanctions are illegal. We are literally killing people in Venezuela, making them suffer, and that's why the sanctions should be removed. Oh no, it's about us. It's about, we need to make everything about us. Here's this really made me laugh. This is from Salazar. So Salazar, she said on Twitter that Biden has officially surrendered to Latin American dictators. Wow, that's news to Latin America. Yesterday, he gives American business to the Cuban regime. Today, he removes sanctions from Maduro in Venezuela to purchase blood-stained oil. We will not forget this November. Do you know what Saudi Arabia is? You're cool with their oil? Their blood-stained oil, that's not a problem for you? It's just the Venezuelan one that bothers you, right? If you're going to be like that, honestly, I would probably be more concerned about the Saudi stuff than Maduro. Yeah? Here's another one from Salazar. She says, one hit after another. Biden gave the Venezuelan regime another present today, lifting sanctions on Maduro's favorite nephew, who was VP of the state's oil company when they stole over $600 million from the Venezuelan people. Even if that were true, the amount of money that is caused in damages with sanctions, it far exceeds this by any imaginable extent. And if you're so concerned about the money of Venezuelans, you literally destroy their infrastructure and set them back decades. And it's the same with all other countries that are sanctioned. It destroys infrastructure. It makes people's lives miserable. It causes them intense misery. And then they, all they're concerned about is yelling this same thing. Oh, we decide what democracy is. You are a dictator. Your oil is bloodstained, and blah blah blah. Well, they're such hypocrites, man. If they're so concerned about this, they don't mind getting it from Saudi Arabia, chopping up a Washington Post journalist, killing people in Yemen, exporting Wahhabism and Al Qaeda. This list is endless. These are some of the comments that I'm seeing online that really made me laugh. Why is Biden easing sanctions on Venezuela and begging dictator Maduro for oil instead of opening U.S. oil production? And then you have this comment underneath says, the better question is, why is Obama telling him to? The answer is, Obama hates America. I don't even know what to say, man. I honestly, I thought this was like a bot or like a parody, and I think this person is serious. Like, this is a serious comment. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? I guess we'll never know. Here's the news, how the news of sanctions lifting affected the markets. So oil falls. This is from Bloomberg. Oil falls as U.S. to allow talks with Venezuela's state producer. Crude fell after the U.S. government announced it plans to allow Chevron Corporation to negotiate its oil license with Venezuela's national producer. West Texas Intermediate settled below 113 on Tuesday. The Biden administration is going to calibrate its sanctions. I love the language. Its sanctions policy in a bid to promote dialogue with Venezuela. The Treasury is allowing Chevron to negotiate its license with PDVSA, but more drilling or an increase in revenue for the regime is not allowed. Futures extended their tumble at the end of the session. And there's also here from Reuters, oil falls 2% on Powell comments, hopes for Venezuelan supply. So after hitting 7 weeks highs, after hitting 7-week highs, oil prices slumped 2% on Tuesday as Reuters reported that the U.S. could ease some restrictions on Venezuela's government, raising hopes that the market could see some additional supplies. So, U.S. President, we read what this means for the sanctions removal. Basically, it's about allowing Chevron to talk about the license, but no drilling yet. So these are steps that are taking place bit by bit. And something else that I wanted to point your attention to is that Venezuela, after the U.S. officials came to Venezuela, they actually released some American prisoners. So this was from the New York Times on March 8th. And it says that Venezuela's authoritarian government on Tuesday released at least 2 imprisoned Americans, a potential turning point in the Biden administration's relationship with Russia's staunchest ally in the Western Hemisphere. The release followed a rare trip by high-level U.S. delegation to Venezuela over the weekend to meet with President Nicolas Maduro, part of a broader Biden administration agenda in autocratic countries that may be rethinking their ties with Putin. That's hilarious. That's really hilarious. Venezuela is not rethinking its ties to Russia at all. As a matter of fact, Maduro said very clearly he understands what Russia's doing and supports Russia. Now, you don't have to agree with either of them, but that's the truth. Venezuela is not rethinking any relationship with Russia. This is ridiculous. And I love how they have to like throw in there that it's an authoritarian government. Like, you know, it's really funny. Everyone they don't like is suddenly, everyone they don't like is suddenly an authoritarian. And the countries they do like, they go like this. They don't want to see anything. You know, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Colombia. Come on. At least be consistent. Why can't you be consistent? Please. It's too much to ask. In any case, I think this is interesting because Iran, a few days ago, this is from Reuters, Iran signed a €110 million contract to repair Venezuelan refinery. So why is this important? This is important because sanctions have decimated Venezuela's infrastructure. And I think it's very important for you to know, in case I haven't said it recently, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on Earth. Okay? That's how oil rich it is. So state firm National Iranian Oil Engineering and Construction Company has signed a €110 million contract to repair and restart Venezuela's smallest refinery, which produced 146,000 barrels a day. Okay? El Palito. So the agreement follows negotiations by Iran's oil minister, Jawad Oji, who met with Maduro. And this also happened as 2 super tankers arrived in Venezuela carrying Iranian crude and condensate. So this is again another indication of the cooperation between Iran and Venezuela because, the thing is, Venezuela had no fuel. Venezuela cannot refine the crude that it has. So Iran was actually sending fuel to Venezuela in exchange for gold. Okay? And what the U.S. would do is they would capture these ships that had fuel, going from Iran to Venezuela, and they would just sell the fuel, like piracy, right? They're just stealing something. They're stealing cargo and selling it and saying it violates U.S. sanctions. Hold on a second. Venezuela is Venezuela, and Iran is Iran. Those are not U.S. That's not U.S. jurisdiction. They're not your territories. And the ships are sailing in international waters. What is that? Like any country can just come and steal a cargo that's being traded between sovereign countries and then sell it off on top of it. Like this is literally piracy. I'm not even kidding. This has happened multiple times. So the fact that you're seeing the U.S. now going and begging them for oil, I would demand reparations, man. I'm not even kidding. You pay me that money back. You pay me that money back because you stole that. That was straight up stolen. And here's from 2020. The United States sells seized Iranian fuel cargoes. They weren't seized, they were stolen, literally stolen. And look how much they made from it. $40 million. $40 million. Like, this is not a joke. This is a lot of money, and very important for people in Venezuela, because the country can't function without fuel. In any case, guys, this is the latest in terms of the ripple effect that the war in Ukraine is having. Do you see how far-reaching this is? It's absolutely incredible. And you're seeing so many wild developments taking place. I can assure you, man, Biden did not send that delegation because he wanted to. He did that as a last resort because they were backed into a corner. They had no choice, and they probably hate it. They probably hate it. Especially given that one of the people leading the delegation was trying to get rid of Maduro for the last couple of years. So they really only did this because they had absolutely no choice. And it really shows you how the world is changing. It's changing in a very rapid, in a very serious way. And this is all because of Ukraine and the war that's happening there. It's truly shaking up the geopolitical makeup of the world. And we're seeing, new alliances being formed, alliances being strengthened, and the emergence of a multipolar world, and the fact that they're ready to lift sanctions on Iran and Venezuela just to spite the Russians. That speaks a lot. That speaks a lot about the situation they're in and how dire it is. And I think that if Maduro does this, again, I can't speak for people in Venezuela, but, as a Syrian, I know that the sanctions being imposed on them are quite similar to what's happening in Syria. It's the same everywhere, right? So, and I know what's happening in Syria. I know my cousins are going through, have been through, and it's really horrible. So, if Maduro goes ahead with this, I think that that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because, yeah, the U.S. did him dirty. They really, really did him dirty. And it's not just the U.S., it's the 60 other countries that also said, oh, you're the illegitimate president. What is this, man? They talk about democracy, and then when the people choose someone, the majority of Venezuelans support this guy. They say this is not democracy. It's none of your business. It's none of your business to choose the president for Venezuelans. Especially when, the guy has popular support. And they always do this. They say Bashar al-Assad is not the legitimate president. Even though he has popular support. He has the support of the majority. It's the same thing in Venezuela with Maduro. It's the same thing with Imran Khan. They got rid of him, even though he has majority support. One of the most popular politicians in Pakistan's history. And they ousted him in a soft coup. It's the same thing with Morales. It's the same thing with Lula. They always go after the guys that have the most support because they don't have the right politics. So democracy doesn't matter all of a sudden. It's about who can benefit our interests, who serves our interests, and doesn't stand in the way. So that's what it's really come down to. And Maduro has to think about his people and what's good for Venezuela. And there's no question about it. Lifting sanctions would be the best thing to do. Although, once again, don't put so much trust in the U.S. because from one day to the next, they could slap him with sanctions again. They could send another silver core bay of piglets to try and oust him. You don't know. Making deal with a snake. Ay. So here you can see they're claiming that Guaido was actually behind the talks with Venezuela. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they're saying. And I really don't know if that's true. So this is what the France 24 are saying. The official said the easing of sanctions is being done at the request of the Guaido-led interim government and is directly tied to an agreement of both sides to return the talks, which they should be announcing very shortly. We'll see. We'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. the funny thing that I should tell you guys is that the reason they say that Guaido is the president is because in the constitution in Venezuela, in every constitution, almost every constitution, there's an hierarchy. So if there's no president, the vice president takes over. If there's no vice president, then there's the leader of the National Assembly. So Guaido used to be the leader of the National Assembly, and he's not anymore. So the whole reason that they stake his legitimacy on is gone. It doesn't even exist anymore, and they still claim that he's the interim president. Based on what? He's not the head of the National Assembly. His stake, he's staking his claim on something that does not exist anymore, and that makes this all the more ridiculous, just so you know. And that happened after the legislative elections in Venezuela, which took place, I think it was end of 2020. And I spoke with Venezuela's foreign minister, Jorge Ariasa, and it's right here on the channel if you want to go watch the interview with him. In any case, just bringing you the latest on the situation. We'll see where it goes from here. And I'll keep you up to date, of course, on everything that's happening in Ukraine and the international ripple effects taking place as they happen.